if your name was Loser in a world of like McKinleys and like Tophers, how do you think you would act? I don't know. I'd be acting up, I think. Anyways, welcome to the Icebreakers podcast. My name is Anne Mary Jacob, and today we're talking about the power of names. So my name to start with, my first and middle name are both my grandma's names, and my last name actually is Jacob, and it's from my dad. And my dad's first name is Jacob, and so you might be like, wait, what? But in my culture, the dad's first name becomes everyone else's last name. And before you ask, because I've been asked a lot, my dad's name is not Jacob, it's Jacob Thomas, because his dad's first name was Thomas. And so that's kind of how my name came about. I also know I have 3 first names, and I've been told many times, I've heard it, that it sounds very, very white. And I get it. Anne Mary Jacob, like, is there a quote unquote whiter name out there? Potentially, and probably not, TBH. But it's actually not a white name, it's a Christian name. And that's because where I'm from in India, Kerala, there's a lot of Christian people there. And so my name is very Christian. And that kind of brings me to another point about names is, I don't know if I want kids, but if I do have kids, would I want to name them a Christian name or an Indian name? On one hand, a Christian name might be easier and help them connect with their religion if they so choose to connect with religion in any way. Like, I've often wondered if I, like, you know, in class or like at the DMV or even like resume and like putting my name into an application, if people have ever thought like, oh, when they finally see me that, oh, that's not who I expected to see because I'm a brown woman and I came in with the name Anne Jacob. I don't know, I've never been told it, but I've always been curious. Like, wouldn't you be curious? But anyways, I have given that a lot of thought, and I don't know what I would do, because on one hand, the Christian name could potentially be easier and make it, you know, easier for them to get a job. But then I also want them to be super connected with their Indian heritage and have that as well. So it's really a toss-up. I mean, honestly, I don't know if I'm going to have kids, so I may never need to cross this bridge, but something interesting. Speaking of names, though, that parents would name their kids, my mom actually was going to name me Selena. I don't know if I seem like a Selena. I don't often think that I feel like an Anne, but because I feel like it just seems like such like an old lady name sometimes. But I also don't know if I could be a Selena. Could I be like a world famous singer? No, my voice is too bad. But I could be on TV, which I was. And actually that brings me to another interesting story. When I was 17 and I started kind of doing my studies in broadcast journalism, one girl who was in my class who's actually a really great friend now, she told me that my name was too basic to be on TV. And I'm grateful that my 17-year-old self had enough, I don't know, is gumption the word, to like let it roll off my back and let her clearly like insecure comment or whatever not derail me. And a few years later, you know, I was on live TV. But, you know, it's so interesting how people think of names and what they assign to you based on your name. And her name, by the way, you know, was a beautiful cultural name, and it just rolled right off the tongue very beautifully. And so, you know, I don't think it had that much effect on me, but at the end of the day, like 10 years later, I still remembered this specific interaction. And so I don't know. I mean, names have a lot to do with things, and who's to say that, you know, your name could or couldn't affect where you are, who you are, what you become. Anyways, going back to the TV bit though, a lot of people know that I worked in finance TV news for a long time, like live TV. And there was an interesting tidbit that I read when I was like kind of researching a little bit on the power of names, aka I read one article, but it was a New Yorker article. And if you are into finance, I think you'll find this really interesting. It's not necessarily to do with names, but company names. And so it read this: we discovered that companies with simpler names that were easier to pronounce received a greater post-release bump than did companies with complex names. The effect was strongest during the first few days of trading when investors had little information about the stock's fundamentals and were more likely to be swayed by extraneous factors. Even stocks with pronounceable ticker codes, the string of letters that investors use to refer to each stock, like Facebook is FB, or AMC obviously is one that's been in the headlines, those outperform those with unpronounceable ticker codes. And so that's kind of interesting. I don't know, I learned that today as I read this little article, but I guess it's good info for me to have as I build my future company that will one day be listed on the NYSE. I don't know. But anyways, back to the very beginning fun fact about being named loser. So interestingly, I read this book way back like in high school called Freakonomics. I hated the book. I clearly wasn't like smart enough to read that at the time, but that was our summer reading. Anyways, in this book, a dad in the 1950s in New York names his kid Winner, and then he names his next kid. He's like, oh, why not? I'm bored. Like, I'm curious. Let me name my other kid Loser. And so what's interesting is, what do you think? I would love to hear in the comments before I reveal it. What do you think each of them do now, or what their jobs were? Okay, so Loser, he actually ended up doing really well in school and ended up working for the New York Police Department. And Winner had a string of crimes actually starting from the age of like 19 or something, and ended up homeless. So I don't know. I think names do have a lot of power, but I think at the end of the day, they are what you make them. Winner maybe had too much pressure to be a perfect kid with way too many wins. I don't know. And then led him to a life of crime. And Loser maybe felt like he had so much to prove and ended up doing really well in school and working in law enforcement. I don't know. All interesting things. Another interesting thing that I won't get into today, but I actually think would be a good episode for next week, would be what you call yourself in your head. Like, I don't call myself Anne in my head. Anyways, we can talk about this next week, and like maybe inner monologues and stuff would be a fun topic. Anyways, I hope you all have a wonderful start to your week, and if you have an interesting name story, let me know. I love hearing about this. Clearly, I look this stuff up for fun. So, I don't know. Hit me with your best stories. Anyways, have a great week, everyone.